Hey babes, what's up? I'm Miss Mila Rose and today I'm back with another YouTube video, and since it's almost Halloween, I decided I'm going to be doing a little Halloween themed video for you guys. I wanted to tell something a little more spookier in a Halloween themed video. The fact of the matter is that I was thinking about it and I really don't think I've had anything that could be a potential ghost story. I don't think I've ever had a ghost encounter. Which is probably a good thing because that stuff frightens me and I probably would never sleep properly at night. So I think one of the scarier things that actually has happened in my life that is the next runner up to a ghost story is my apartment horror time story, because it was a nightmare and I'm gonna explain to you why. This is gonna be a long one, so make sure you get your snacks and I hope you enjoy this Halloween themed video. So now into the main story time of this video, which is my apartment horror time story. So let me preface that I do not live there anymore. I'm in a brand new apartment. I've been living in this new apartment since late June, so I've had my breather space to recover from this apartment that I lived at previously. So for starters, when I was apartment hunting for my last place, I was dead set on getting a cat. I wanted a cat so bad because I grew up with cats at home. I had one cat and then we had a second, and she was a girl and she gave birth, and we had kittens and we kept two of them, and I just love cats. And I never really had many experiences with dogs, so I didn't really want a dog, but I did end up getting a dog. I'll explain why. But a lot of the places that I was looking to rent did not allow any pets. No cats, no dogs. And that was frustrating me, and I was starting to lose hope because it had been my goal for a long time to actually get a place that allowed cats. So I kept finding these apartments that I didn't want to rent to because I knew I wouldn't be able to get a cat, and I don't know, that was kind of a deal breaker for me. So then I went to another apartment viewing that I actually really liked. It was kind of big on the inside. I wasn't expecting it to be that size for the amount of rent that would have to be paid. So it was actually relatively cheap for how it looked on the inside. Looks are and everything. I'm gonna get into all the amazing juicy details of this apartment very soon. So I asked the manager of this apartment, do you allow for cats specifically, because I really want a cat. And they said that cats had just been banned from their entire apartment complex because of the previous owner who owned a cat and had completely shredded up and torn up the carpet that was previously in this specific unit. So I sighed because I actually was ready to move in and sign papers for this apartment. However, he said that we could get a dog. And so I gave it a little bit of thought, and I was researching some breeds and I came across Australian Shepherds, and I was like, you know what, they're really cute and they're apparently really smart, so maybe I will actually get a dog. Best decision I've actually ever made. So I went through this apartment, I signed the papers, I paid the background check, all that jazz, and they got us hooked up within the week, which was awesome because that's around the time that I wanted to move in. Now, I'm not gonna sit down and tell you guys that the first few days were perfectly fine and cheery and I didn't even know there's anything wrong with this apartment, because I'd be lying. I noticed issues with this apartment on day one of moving in. So one thing about me that I hate, but every time I try and fix it, I just mess it up again, is my sleeping schedule. I'm slightly nocturnal, and even when I do fix my sleep schedule, so I'm waking up early in the morning and going to bed not so late at night, I just fall back into old patterns where I'm waking up at like 10, 11 in the morning and going to bed at like 3 in the morning. So I do sleep in a little bit. So the first night that I slept in this apartment was okay, but then I woke up to the blasting of music from a radio, and I knew it must have been like right outside our window. And then I looked out the window and it was construction workers, and we had been pre-disclosed that there was a lot of construction work going on at the building. However, the apartment manager specifically said that the construction noise that goes on at the building was very quiet and we'd hardly notice it. And that was actually another big deal for me because the last apartment that I lived in had a lot of construction work going on, and when I was camming on my free cams, it just made it impossible to work because there was just so much construction noise going on all the time, and they never gave you a disclosure of, okay, we're gonna be using hammers and drills from this time to this time on this day. It just happened. So I couldn't plan on it, I couldn't prepare it, I couldn't schedule around it. So I really wanted to work out of an apartment that wasn't gonna experience that much construction noise. So I knew that they were actually doing a lot of changes to the building, and I knew that there was going to be a lot of construction work going on, but he specifically said that it wasn't going to be noisy at all and we shouldn't have an issue. Mind you, if they didn't blast their radios all the freaking time, then it wouldn't have been noisy. But yeah, I woke up at like 8 in the morning to the sound of a radio blasting, and it was the construction workers blasting this radio right outside our window. And that's when I soon started to realize that our walls are also made of paper. So when I say they were blasting it and we had a wall in between, it's not much of a wall, it's like paper. I could hear the lyrics to the song very loud and clear. I could sing along to the songs if I wanted to. That's how clear I could hear it, and it was loud and it was boomy inside of my apartment. So that was really annoying to wake up to that morning, my first morning at this apartment. But I thought maybe this is just the one-time thing, it's not gonna happen again. And then the next morning, I wake up to the exact same thing. And at this point, I am irritated. I think to myself, this is actually something that is routine for them, and it's not something that I'm okay with being a routine. So I contacted the manager and I explained the situation. I said, hey, your construction workers are blasting their radio music outside of my window and it's waking me up in the morning and is unreasonably loud. Can you please tell them to turn down the radio? So he did. He contacted them and they turned it down. And the next couple of days, it was okay. But literally like a few days later, they started up again. And it was a day-to-day thing. And since I had already complained once, and it clearly didn't help, I just kind of started dealing with it. I hated waking up to this radio blasting. I couldn't hear any of their construction noises except for their radio that I could literally jam along to while I'm waking up after 4 or 5 hours of sleep. So you can imagine how cranky I also felt because I hadn't even gotten much sleep at this point. And this was every morning because the construction workers were working every day. So eventually after a week or so of this, I couldn't deal with this anymore and I complained again because I knew that I was not going to be able to function like a normal human being if I didn't get my sleep. So I contacted the apartment manager and he contacted them and had them turn down their music. And they listened. I could still hear their music, but it was a lot quieter now. If this is the best it's gonna get, this is the best it's gonna get. I can't do anything about it, so I'm just gonna deal with it. I actually moved into this apartment building early July, so I actually had to deal with that for the whole summer. And then once fall hit, they actually started slowing down because it started getting colder. The first day that I was in my apartment, after I was rudely awakened by the construction workers' radio blasting, I started up my morning routine, and then I heard one of my neighbors talking on what I think was a phone because I couldn't hear the other end of the conversation, just her. I could hear that it was a girl. I could hear every word that she said. It was some financial stuff. I don't know, I didn't really care to really pay attention to it except for the fact that I knew the walls were so thin. I could hear so clearly, and that frustrated me too because then I knew that if I was speaking in my apartment, that any neighbor around me could hear exactly word for word what I was saying too, especially if I spoke more loudly. So that made it even more frustrating to me because that meant when I was filming my videos, I knew that my neighbors could hear everything that was going on. And I get pretty loud in my videos. So I knew I had no privacy at this apartment whatsoever. Another fun little fact that was going on towards the fall is that our balconies have been completely stripped of the side railings between apartments. So when you went onto the apartment, it was just one long strip and there was nothing dividing the balconies. So there was no privacy on my balcony, and they promised that they'd get that fixed relatively soon, which actually didn't happen for like 6 months. So for the first half year that I was living at this apartment, I didn't have any privacy on my balcony because there was no side railings to divide the apartments. The apartment manager also promised that they would be getting assigned parking spaces, which even at the point that I moved out a year later had still not happened. Back to the balcony situation. Since I had no privacy, but the construction workers needed to get on the balcony to do their work to get the balconies back up and running, the construction workers were constantly going onto my balcony doing the work that they had to do, and I never got any notices of when this was gonna happen. It just happened. I would wake up in the morning and they'd be on my balcony. I would wake up to them talking and doing work on my balcony. I never got one notice of them doing this. And of course, they had their radio blasting on my balcony while I was trying to sleep or when I was trying to work. And it was really frustrating because I had no notice that they were going to be on my balcony. If I was camming or filming a video at that time and they were on my balcony, the blinds that I had on my balcony weren't the best. They had little slits. You could see right through my balcony window even when my blinds were completely shut. So if I was naked on my bed, the construction workers could conveniently see inside of my apartment and see that I'm naked. So a lot of the times when I was filming videos or in a cam show or camming, I had to be like, okay guys, I'm gonna move really quick. So things were kind of calming down towards October, November because of the construction work was slowing down too. But here's when new annoyances started to arise. The apartment neighbor that I could hear speaking on her phone actually had a child. Now I knew she was expecting a baby because I could hear the conversations on her phone and I could see baby boxes in the recycling bin at the complex. Things like stroller boxes and whatnot. So when the baby arrived, the baby cried a lot and this was so irritating. If I can hear her speaking word for word, I could hear the full-on crying that this baby was doing. And I know I have to be a little sympathetic to this woman because she had to deal with it too. But I shouldn't have had to hear it to the extent that I did. Again, paper thin walls. So I was listening to this baby cry day in and day out and all through the night. I would wake up at 3 in the morning, this baby was crying. I would wake up at 7 in the morning, this baby was crying. And it wasn't just the baby that would wake me up either. I would constantly hear them waking up to go to work in the morning at like 6 in the morning, showering, talking to each other. I think it was husband and wife. I once woke up to the lady complaining to her husband that there was something wrong with the shower and she couldn't shower, and because of that she couldn't go to work and she was really frustrated and angry. And I could hear word for word this entire conversation that was going on because paper thin walls. So that was really irritating. But at least I didn't have to hear blasting radios from the construction workers outside. So for a while that was the only thing that I had to deal with until late winter. But my other neighbor, when I'd first moved in, actually moved out not too long after I moved in. So I only had one side neighbor and an upstairs neighbor. But I knew I had a new neighbor even before I could see that the master lock was off their front door because I could hear blasting TV playing from just past my wall at like 2 in the morning when I was trying to sleep. And I was irritated. So I knocked at her door and I asked her, can you please turn your TV down? And she said, that's not my TV. I don't know what you're hearing. So you're obviously awake though for you to be answering the door. And as soon as I got back inside to go to bed, the TV was off. I'm no detective, but I'm pretty sure he put 1 and 2 together and yeah. So whatever, I go to bed, wake up in the morning, no big deal. I'm doing my morning things and I start hearing the most obnoxious lady talking on the phone, or I don't even know, probably on the phone. Just a very obnoxious tone of voice, like a spoiled brat speaking. I don't even know how to explain it. It was just, I could hear what she was saying so clearly. She just sounded so obnoxious to me, like her personality. And it was so irritating to hear her speak. I'm sorry, that sounds probably really rude, but honestly, I was irritated to hear this lady speak because she sounded so obnoxious. She sounded very immature and she was a lot older than me, and I don't even know. But that night, I tried to go to bed again and I heard her TV again. And so I couldn't sleep. And so I went and knocked on her door again and I asked her, can you please turn down your TV? And she proceeded to get really angry with me and said again that that isn't me. She closed her door, I went back inside, I tried to sleep again, and of course, the TV was off. And mind you, at this exact time, I'm also dealing with this baby that's my other neighbor crying day in, day out, middle of the night, early in the morning, throughout the day when I'm filming, camming. It was horrible. Now, I haven't spoken much with my upstairs neighbors yet. Now, I'm not blaming on the neighbors completely. I mean, again, these walls are made of paper, so I feel bad if I sound like I'm blaming them because I know it's just the shitty apartment and not the individual for the most part. But upstairs, I could hear when this guy, and it was a guy, I don't know if there was anyone else in the apartment, but I could hear every single time this guy was walking around their apartment. It was squeaking and creaking really bad. Like if you lived in a house and you had a squeaky, creaky upstairs floor, that is exactly what it sounded like. That is not an apartment building at that point. That is like a house with creaky floors. You could tell how old this apartment was just by the fact that the walls were so thin, creaky. I could hear him getting out of bed. I can hear him getting in bed. I can hear doors opening, doors closing. I could hear lights flicking on and off. He had girls over every now and then, and it was always late at night. At like 2 in the morning, I would hear this man with 2 other ladies talking extremely loud. These ladies would be laughing their heads off like the funniest thing in the world just happened. And they were so loud, obnoxiously loud at like 2 in the morning when I'm clearly trying to sleep. I actually called the police on like 2 occasions because I couldn't deal with how loud these women were laughing. Another thing that I regularly heard from my upstairs neighbor is whenever he wanted to do with a girl, I could hear the moans, I could hear the squeaking of the bed, I could hear everything. My battery's low! So yeah, it's December. I can hear my upstairs neighbor doing the do. I can hear this neighbor's baby crying constantly. And this brand new neighbor that moved in is obnoxiously loud. But at least I don't have a radio blasting and waking me up every morning, right? Right? It was very annoying now to have 3 neighbors now that could hear everything that went on in my apartment because I had no privacy in terms of noise. So anytime I was filming a video or camming and I was moaning really loud, I would know that all of my neighbors could hear everything that was going on, because if it was any of them, I know that I could hear everything that was going on in their apartments. And then the impossible happens. The immature, obnoxious lady gets a baby. So now I have this lady's baby crying day in and day out, all through the night, early in the morning, and now this lady's baby is doing the exact same thing. And because the walls are paper thin, I can hear everything that's going on both ends. 2 crying, screaming babies. Sometimes they would even cry and scream at the same time. I could not be making this story up. They were so loud, so annoying, and I'm sorry, but I couldn't deal with that. I mean, could you? I didn't have any kids. I take birth control. I shouldn't have had to deal with 2 crying and screaming babies. Again, paper thin walls. So I think that was where I was peaking frustration with living at this apartment. And I knew that I was not gonna be able to live here another year. And I started ticking down the months till my lease was over so that I could get my booty right outside of that apartment and never turn back, because I was just having the worst time of my life. I was getting depressed over living in this apartment. It was actually really taking a big mental toll on me. So fast forward a little bit, it's about March now and the weather's starting to get a little warmer. This baby, the new baby, actually seemed to come and go a lot. Sometimes the baby was there and sometimes the baby was just, I don't know, it just disappeared. But then it would reappear like a magic trick and start crying again for days on end. But then for like a week it'd be gone. Thankfully, the other baby actually stopped crying after a few months. And since the weather was starting to get warmer, the construction workers were back, and I knew that the moment I woke up to their radio blasting outside of my front door. So I knew I wasn't gonna be putting up with this anymore, and I knew it was gonna be a day-to-day thing because that's how it was the entire time I was living at this apartment complex. So I immediately called my manager and I told him what was going on, and I told him, you need to get your people, your construction workers, to turn down their music. It is obnoxiously loud. It was blaring through my apartment because the walls are made of paper. But then my upstairs neighbor decided to get a surround sound system and started blasting his TV day in and day out, and I couldn't even film because of it. It was booming. It was like the radio but on steroids. And at this point I actually didn't have that much longer for the rest of my lease, so I kind of just dealt with it, and I just kept on telling myself, just get through it. We're gonna move out of here soon, just a few more months. I was literally losing my mind. He didn't just get a TV, he got a guitar too. And he played this one every single day I could hear him plucking his strings, playing his music, and on top of the TV that he was blasting every single day, and me trying to film every other day, it was impossible to work. I literally would have to stop filming, go take a long walk with my dog at the park, or go grocery shopping, or anything, just to ride out the time that my upstairs neighbor was making so much extra noise than necessary. And I know it doesn't sound like that much, but after dealing with all of the noise and things that I had to deal with up until this point, I was already losing my mind, and the smallest little thing was ticking me off. So back to the radio though. It is a very recurring subject. For a long time, the construction workers were being very good about it, playing it really quiet or not at all, or I don't know, I just couldn't hear it. But one day when I was sleeping, I woke up to the sound of a radio blasting sometime late spring. So I wake up irritated as hell because I hadn't had enough sleep at this point. So I just went over to the other room, closed the door, and tried to sleep on my couch. But I couldn't sleep there either because beyond those walls, they were doing hammering. So in the other room, beyond those walls, I could hear the radio blasting. And then when I swapped rooms, that's where I could actually hear the hammers going. So I was so upset because then I had to wake up, and I had only a few hours of sleep at this point, of course. So I was irritated beyond belief. And how many times have I called my manager at this point to tell the construction workers to turn down their radio because it's booming and blasting in my apartment because the walls are made of paper? So I dealt with it. I got out of bed, and that's all I could do about the situation. Only 2 more months until the end of my lease, right? But noise wasn't the only concern that I had with this apartment. No, it wasn't just the paper thin walls that bothered me and irritated me to no end. Everything about this apartment was actual garbage. Everything was breaking, everything was falling apart, and I couldn't do anything to stop it from happening. Every single time I opened my balcony door, one blind would fall off. And even if I put it back in, it kept on falling every single time the door was opened or closed. A new blind would fall off. Eventually, I actually chipped the blind at the part where it's supposed to slip in. And so I decided I'm gonna stop putting these blinds back up and just put them in the corner of my room and crazy glue them back on before I leave my apartment, just so I get my security deposit back. I had like 6 or 7 blinds that fell off. Another thing that broke was my bathroom towel rack. So on my wall, on the opposite wall facing my bathtub, I had this metal rack that you could put a towel on, and so I used that. I put my towel there, and this one day after I got out of the shower and I went to take my towel down, it just fell off. And at this point, both of the babies are screaming and crying. I have a bunch of blinds stacked in the corner of my room, and then my towel rack falls off. And so I just take the towel rack, shove it with the blinds, and decide I'm gonna just put it back on before I leave this apartment. Another thing that broke was my stove. So actually when I moved in, the stove already had its issues. There was 2 small rings and there was 2 big rings, and one of the big ones was not working when we moved in. But upon the first time I ever even used the stove, I realized that the other big one didn't work either. I mean, when I say it didn't work, it was very finicky. Sometimes it would work, sometimes it wouldn't, and sometimes when it did work, it would only work on low heat. It would get hot, but it wouldn't get really hot. It would take so long to cook anything on my stove because the only rings that worked properly were the small rings. So you remember when I said the second morning that I moved in and I heard the radios, I called and complained to my manager? I complained about a few things. I complained about the radio, I complained about the stovetops not working, and I complained about the closet doors in my bedroom that were falling off the hinges. That was something that happened initially when I moved in too, is that every time I moved the closet doors for my bedroom closet, they would just fall off the hinges and I couldn't get them back on. The entirety of my lease, I couldn't get them back on and nothing was done about them, even though I complained about them. So I just left them there and I would have to physically move them myself to get anything in or out of the closet. I literally just used that as like a storage closet because I didn't want to deal with it constantly. But yeah, I complained about those 3 things on that phone call, which is my second morning at this apartment. And he said that he would come by and take a look at the stove. So he came over to take a look at the stove maybe the next day or 2. And he took a look at it and he said, okay, I'm gonna order in a piece for you for this stove so we can get that stove part working for you again, which was the one that didn't work initially before we even moved in. Again, I moved in early July, and we didn't get this part that was ordered until almost Christmas. I actually contacted him in the fall wondering what's up with the piece because it was getting really annoying for me to cook with my stove. And he said, oh yeah, I forgot to order the part. So he finally ordered the part several months after my initial complaint, and he told me he was going to get this part ordered for me. So fast forward until almost Christmas, he shows up with this part finally because, oh yeah, I forgot I ordered this part. Here it is. And he comes into my apartment and he tries to use the part and he realizes it's not working. So he's like, okay, I'm gonna get you a new stove. That took half a year for him to order a part, figure out that the part doesn't fix the problem, and realize that half the stove isn't even working now, so I'm gonna get you a new stove. Because at this point, the stove part, the other big ring that was very finicky, was even worse now, and it would only cook on low heat when it worked. So it was literally only the two small rings that I could use, and because there were only the small rings, it took me forever to cook anything. So yeah, 6 months later, I got a brand new stove. Problem fixed. But then the problems with the doors starts up. And these were by far the most frustrating to me out of anything. Okay, except for the noise. The noise was definitely the worst. But the doors. So after Christmas, when the stove finally fixed, it was like January now, I noticed that my front door was starting to slowly come off the hinges. And I don't know why I didn't really think too much of this, but I just thought like, whatever, I'm just gonna deal with this. I don't think it's gonna be a big issue. My door still works fine. But one day I was actually having issues opening my door because it was actually pretty bad at this point. I couldn't even open my front door. I had to struggle with it, and when I did, I had to struggle closing it to lock it from behind. So I get the door closed, I get the door locked, I had to go and get groceries. I come back and I cannot get this door open for the life of me. I can't unlock it, I can't open the door, it is stuck, it is jammed. I'm outside in the freezing cold with all my groceries, my fresh produce that is starting to go bad in the car, and I can't get into my apartment. I am freaking out. I called the apartment manager and he said, okay, I'll be here tomorrow to get your door open. Sir, I can't get in my front door. You need to come here ASAP so I can get in my front door, is what I told him on the phone. And so he's like, okay, I'm coming right now. It only took him a few minutes to get there, so I don't know why he said to wait for tomorrow morning, but he came in a few minutes. He showed up. So we pried the door open with some tools, and he said that if it ever acts up again, to call him and he'll come and fix it for me. So my door was working again. But then the other door. Let's rewind to when I was taking a look at the apartment and signing the lease. So there was one door in particular that I had to ask the guy who was walking me around the apartment about, because my bedroom door had a lock on it. I was told that I was gonna get a key from the front door, a key for the mailbox, and a key for the laundry room for the apartment complex. I was not ever told that I was gonna get another key for a bedroom lock. So I saw the lock on the door and I asked him, okay, does this have a key to go with it? What do I do with this lock? And he said, the lock doesn't even work. Just remember that. The lock doesn't work. We don't have a key to give you. The lock doesn't work. Don't worry about it. Fast forward to May, just a month before my lease was over. So you might actually get a little confused about this. My bed was too big to put in the bedroom, so it was actually in the living room where my balcony was. It was the only place where it fit properly. I have side drawers on my bed that extend, so I don't want to put it in a tight space when I need to extend my drawers that are in my bedboard. So the bedroom that I used was actually, I just had my couch, my TV, my computer desk, that kind of stuff. So I was in the bedroom the night before, and I had left the room, closed the door, and went to bed in my living room, in my bed. And in the morning, I actually had booked myself to CAM for that morning. And I went over to my room, and I couldn't open the bedroom door. The lock had locked. The lock works? What? So I was beyond livid at this point because, again, all of this stuff has happened All of the blinds were falling. My towel rack fell off. My front door, I was almost locked out of my own apartment. 2 crying babies. Guy blasting his TV upstairs. The radio from the construction workers constantly blasting every single morning, waking me up for an entire year almost. A month before the end of my lease, I just want to get the hell out of this apartment. And then I am locked out of the only way to access my computer, which is my life, which is my job. I can't even get my laptop because my bedroom door is now locked. The lock that you told me before I signed the lease that did not work. So I'm really pissed at this point, and I can't take any more of this apartment. So I call my apartment manager again, and I let him know that, hey, do you remember that lock that you told me does not work? It's locked, and I need to get in there so I can work for the day. And he says, okay, I'll come right over. Takes him 3 hours. 3 hours to get to my apartment, and he pries the door open with some tools that he had in his vehicle, and he just says, leave the door open, don't close it because it'll relock, and I'm going to be back either later today or tomorrow or sometime later this week to get the lock off your door because I don't have a replacement for it right now, so I don't want to do it for you right now, and I'll have a replacement doorknob for your door latest later this week. So I say, okay, cool. So I had a friend sleeping over that night who knew the situation, and in the morning my door was closed by my friend. Accidentally, it happened, and I was locked out of my room again, and I was supposed to cam again that morning, and I couldn't now because my laptop again was stuck in the other room that I couldn't get into. So I didn't even bother calling my apartment manager at this point because I knew I wasn't gonna wait 3 hours for this person to get here, and now I saw how to open the door. I just needed the tool to do it. So I went to Walmart, I got a tool, I pried the door open myself, and I got my laptop and I went right to work. I took that doorknob completely off so this would never happen again. And guess what? To no surprise, my apartment manager never spoke to me again about this door situation. He didn't come back the next day. He didn't come back later in the week. I never got a phone call. He never spoke to me about it at all. I never got a replacement doorknob. Not that it matters. I was literally moving out like in the next month. So yeah. That was my apartment horror story in a nutshell. I had to deal with paper thin walls, 2 crying babies. I could hear all of the conversations around me. Everyone can hear all of my conversations and video filming. And upstairs neighbors got a surround sound system. The construction workers had radios blasting every single morning almost. Everything was breaking in my apartments. I was locked out of my own house and my own bedrooms multiple times. And that's the story of my last apartment experience and why I moved out of that apartment. Actually, there was more reasons. I already said this in another video, but the walls and the carpet that was in my apartment were a very gross yellowish color, and it made filming really terrible because even the best lighting in the world could not change the fact that I was getting a lot of yellow color in my video. In the bedroom heater never worked, not from the day we moved in. I never really complained about it because I just got a space heater and I put it in the room, and that was that for me. I didn't really care, and I had blankets and stuff. And also, the front door that I had actually went straight to the outdoors. It wasn't like an apartment building. Our front door actually had a pretty decent gap at the bottom and top. Ants and spiders always got into my apartment. I'm sure there's so much that I've missed. I just can't remember all of the small little annoyances when I have the bigger things that are really bothering me about this apartment, but I definitely covered the main ones for you guys. So I don't know, I guess there could have been worse things about the apartment to have happened. So I don't know if I'm just being like a baby about the situation. I definitely tried to handle it the best that I could, but honestly, living in this apartment, it made me so depressed, so stressed. It really took a toll on my mental health, and as soon as I moved into this apartment, everything changed. Depression lifted, the stress lifted. I felt so much clearer mentally, and I don't have to deal with any of the same issues in this apartment like I did in the last apartment. So there is a happy ending. There are things that I learned that I wish I knew before moving into my last apartment. For example, the stove, the closet doors in the bedroom, the heater that didn't work in the bedroom. You can actually file notices to your landlord, and if they can't can't get things fixed in a timely manner. So for example, the heater in the bedroom, that would be more of an urgent thing that you could request to get fixed because it's literally the heat for the winter. Also the stove, because it's essential to cooking, which is essential to living. That is also something that they would only get like a week's notice to fix for you. If they fail to provide these fixes for you within the appropriate time frame, you could actually take out from your next month's rent expenses to fix these things on your own. And these are legal rights that you have within the states that you live in. And I'm sure every state has their own rules for rentals and rental policies. Really look up your rules in your state and how you're protected as an individual renting out an apartment, because it'll really save you the grief for getting certain things fixed in a timely manner if your landlord is an idiot like mine was. I'd really like to hear your guys' stories. If you guys have had any bad apartment experiences or anything similar, just leave it in the comment below and I love to read some of those comments. And if you liked it, leave a thumbs up and a subscribe with the notifications below, and I'll see you guys next week for another video. Bye!